All right. I'm excited to be here with my new friend, Sara Campbell. Sara is the founder of Savvy Music Studio. She helps independent teachers and creatives design sustainable businesses. So, as a business and marketing coach for musicians, she helps them to teach from a place of authenticity and blending clarity with strategy, but not hype. And she's the creator of the BravePants Branding program, which guides clients to grow visibility and income without getting burnt out. So I'm really excited to have her on the podcast today, talk a little bit about the cross section between as a musician, how can you share your gift in order to be able to to teach, be able to turn your music into an additional form of an income stream to sustain your music. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here today.
Thanks for inviting me, Michael. I'm excited to chat.
I had to resist so much the urge to introduce you with the catchphrase that "babes who hustle." Okay. Apparently, this was like on our initial bio. You were featured on a magazine like 10 years ago or something. So,
Yeah.
anyways,
Yeah, that's funny.
and then we were like, there needs to be like a male, like hunks who hustle. We could go down like a whole rabbit hole, but Sara, could you share just a quick introduction into your story and how you started this platform, started working with music teachers?
Sure. So I have a long background in music and performing. I've got a couple of like fancy degrees and all that jazz. And I started teaching probably about 20 years ago. And I got into blogging back when like blogging was hot and all that stuff. And I started talking a lot about marketing and, kind of giving people insights into how I was running my own business. And just over time, it grew into Savvy Music Studio. I've worked with several different companies, and now I'm having a lot of fun working with independent music teachers, and also, people outside of that. I work with performers, I work with content creators, and I really have a good time helping people figure out like how to do this sustainably, because I think so many people are feeling really burnt out nowadays. And it's time to like come back to our roots and figure out how to like be joyful about what we're doing again.
Hmm. Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I love that particular focus because it does feel like, especially in our society, it's easy to get kind of caught in the rat race and even like have external success, but not actually be joyful or happy as we're doing it. Could you maybe share a little bit about how you came to that specific point? And I'm guessing there's probably a reason why that part of it really became such a core part of it for you.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think it's like your standard brand story, right? Like I was experiencing that myself. Like I was definitely really burnt out, and like years ago when I was trying to like cobble together, a job or multiple jobs at the time, like to sustain me, I realized like I was working so hard and never taking any time off, like not going on vacations, like struggling to make ends meet, and I thought, there's got to be a better way to do this. And so, I worked with coaches. I did a lot of research on my own. And then I realized, like, hey, if you're going to do this, if you're going to be a musician, a performer, a teacher, like all of these different things, you really need to get your goals in line, and you need to know, why are you doing this in the first place? And so, that got me like getting really serious about figuring out business strategy and how to, put your goals first rather than like your clients first or like the craft first. Because I think, especially as performers, and musicians in general, like we can get really sucked into that, and we forget, why are we doing this in the first place? Like, why is this our job? It's because we love music and because we love to perform or we love to teach, but you're doing this so that you can have a life outside of that. And I think it's easy to lose sight of it.
Mm. Yeah, that's a great lesson. Yeah, I mean, it kind of reminds me of just how weird it is, like backwards of a system it is if you spend your whole life doing something you hate, so that someday you can kind of like retire, and then like, and at that point, like you're like, oh man, it just, yeah, it seems like such a important question that you're asking right now, which is like, why are you doing what you're doing, and what's the purpose of, what's the point, and setting goals around that. Would love to hear your recommendation as it relates to goal setting, and how does someone get started on doing that inner work of figuring out what do they want? What are their goals? Like, and do you have any advice on what things to avoid in goal setting versus what things work really well?
Sure. I think that for a lot of us, when we think of goal setting, we get really focused on like numbers, or like I want to reach this many people, or I want to get this many people on my email list, or I want to make this much money. But we kind of forget to take a step back and go like, okay, well, what do I want my life to actually look like? Like,
Mm,
what do I want to be able to do outside of work, like in 5 years? Like, where, if I could, I always use the phrase like, if you could wave a magic wand and suddenly you're able to live this life that, you're taking more time off of work, you're spending time with friends, you're spending time with family, like what would that actually look like for you? Rather than getting into like, how much income do you want to make, or how much, how many people do you want to reach? Tell me like why you want to make that much income. Tell me why you want to reach that many people. And that's when
mm,
we start getting like clearer on, oh, well, I want to be able to make like XYZ dollars so that I can take like 10 weeks off a year and, go on multiple vacations with my family. Or I want to be able to, take a like couple hours out of my day every day to go read a book, or go to the gym, or like go have dinner with friends. And we forget like the life stuff because
mm,
we get so focused on finding success in the business. We forget like that needs to translate into success in your life outside of the business. So
mm,
like to really hone in on that, because I think I like danced around the answer, right? I like to start with, what do you want your life to look like in 5 years? Like, don't tell me about your, just about your business. Tell me like what happens when you get up in the morning? What's going on later that day? Like, walk me through your week, walk me through your year, and really describe what are the things that you want to be able to do.
mm. Awesome. Yeah, that's super helpful. So what I'm hearing you say is that it's easy to get trapped or lost in number based goals, which can have their place, but like it can be beside the point too. Like in going deeper and asking, why does that matter to you? What do you actually want your life to look like, can help you get to a more truer place of what actually motivates you and why it's important. It reminds me of the analogy or the metaphor of kind of like climbing up a bookshelf, and how important it is to make sure that like you're climbing up the right bookshelf. And yeah, maybe setting those goals without the why could be sort of like climbing up the ladder. And it's like, cool, like you can keep climbing up the ladder, but if you're climbing up the wrong bookshelf, then you might realize like, wow, like I got to the top of a place that I didn't really want to be at. So what you're
Yeah.
saying is make sure you're climbing up the right ladder.
Yeah, that's a great analogy. You don't want to get to the top of that and realize that that book that you've been reaching for is like on the next shelf over.
Mhm. Awesome. So, cool. So, what I'm hearing you say is that one of the best places to start is really by creating some space in your life and getting clear on 5 years from now. What do you actually want your life to look like? What do you actually want your day to day life, to feel like, to look like? What are you doing? And getting clarity on that and understanding what's really driving you. And then from there, how do you recommend that someone organizes their day to day life around those goals? Like, how often should they set that type of goal? How often should they reflect on it? Do they break up the time frames so they can kind of think through, the next year, or like what's your process for planning around those bigger goals?
Well, planning is my happy place. So I could talk about this for a long time, but I would suggest really, you know, we need to look at these things like at least once a year and give it like a very serious look. Everybody thinks about January as the time to like set goals, but I don't care what time of year it is. Like if you're going to do like your yearly planning in September, fantastic, do it in September. But sit down, really look, and not just by yourself too. If you have a partner or you have a family, like sit down together and really and look at like are we going the direction that we see ourselves wanting to go in 5 years, or like, hey, let's talk about retirement, all of these things. You need to get really serious about those things. And I would say at least have one really big goal setting session per year, And then I like to think of planning like in quarterly sessions and then like monthly sessions and then weekly sessions. So if you think you start big, right, and you try to break it all down, but then you have to keep revisiting that in different periods of the year so that you don't get so overwhelmed to like when you do that first initial goal setting session, then you're like, oh, wow, okay, so this is all the stuff that I've written down, but how the heck do I get there? So that's where like the quarterly planning and monthly planning and all that kinds comes into play.
Mm, cool. So, starting with the big why is really helpful. That 5 year kind of target, but then kind of bringing it back to some of those time frames you recommend are once a year, doing a deeper planning. Quarterly is really a sweet spot where it's a big enough time frame where you can really do some big things, but it's also close enough that it doesn't feel uh, ambiguous. And even weekly, weekly having like a check in, creating a space to just see,
Yeah.
are you aligned with your bigger goals? What it reminds me of is there. I love this video. I don't even know what it's called, but it has like probably a few million views on YouTube, and it's this like scientist looking guy who's just kind of like your classic, like kind of geeky, like oh my gosh, like these experiments, and he has a bunch of dominoes stacked up. They have this little tiny domino, and then like there's a bunch of dominoes stacked up, and each of them gets taller and taller until he has this massive domino. And he's like, based on gravity and momentum, like, but then the point is he pushes over this little tiny domino and it knocks over the bigger ones. So that little tiny domino knocks over this huge, massive domino at the end of it. And that's what comes to mind when I think of what you're recommending right now with this like big picture goal. It's like 5 years, big domino. It's like, how am I going to do it? But if you align all of your time frames up, it's sort of like you push over one day at a time towards, and you keep it in alignment with the right dominoes, and you can knock over those big 5 year goals.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you don't eat an elephant all at once, right? What's the phrase? Like you eat an elephant one bite at a time. I don't
One
know
bite
who
at a
wants
time.
to eat an elephant. It's a very odd phrase. And I'm sorry for the vegetarians out there.
There's only one way to find out. We need an elephant here, stat. Cool. So let's go a little bit deeper into the forest. Now, I feel like we've kind of zoomed out. We have a good lay of like the overall forest goal setting, and we've talked about planning and different time frames. What would you recommend for artists? I think there's probably a lot of people who are watching and listening to this right now, where their big goal, their big 5 year vision, is that they want to be doing music full time, and they want to
Yeah.
be expressing themselves, creating their artwork, and creating a community around it. Making a sustainable income with their music, and now maybe they're clear on that being their goal, but they're like, how the heck do I actually make that happen, and where do I start? It's so much noise. Like, how do I cut through? What would your recommendations be for at the time of recording this right now? What do you see that's working right now as it relates to business strategies for them to actually do accomplish those goals?
There's so many different ways to do it. And I think it really depends on, who you are as a person and what really lights you up. And, when you have a career in music, there's so many different doors to take, right? There's so many different paths. And so you have to start by asking like, well, what is it that I really love to do? And like, how can I maybe do that thing in different ways? I think that, one of the things that works really well for musicians is to think a little bit more about diversity. Like, what are the different income streams that are coming in, right? And to get like clear about where is this income coming? Like, okay, so gigging, right? So like the actual shows and things like that, and the money that comes in from shows, great. What about like all the way you're distributing your music, or the way that you're treating your socials, or the way that you're monetizing your social channels? Great, and then think about what are the other income streams that would make you happy, right? Is it doing custom work for people? Is it composing for is it composing for television or composing for movies? Is it teaching people how to riff like you? Or, there's so many different ways that you can go about it. Like, choose what makes you happy and what really lights you up, because when you do that and you choose those income streams, then you're going to be more successful at it, because when you do something that's lighting you up, it attracts people. Like, people get excited when they see people who are passionate about what they're doing. So I think you got to find out, like, what do I want to do and what makes me really happy? Because if you choose some path that, like, somebody's like, yeah, you can do this and you can do this and you can do this, and you just try to follow like a formula that's handed to you, but if it doesn't fit and you find yourself going like, I really don't, I am not enjoying this, then,
Mm.
the income's going to dry up, because if you're not happy doing it, people aren't going to come to you. So find what makes you happy, find what lights you up.
Mm. Good stuff. Yeah. So what I'm hearing you say is that kind of like that bookshelf analogy, where you make sure like you're on the right bookshelf. There's a lot of different paths that you could take. There's a lot of different routes that could probably get you to that same like destination, but you have to figure out what actually resonates with you and what do you enjoy. Which is going to be different for everyone. So would you recommend that folks just make a list of like all of the different ones and then start to explore, kind of get their feet wet with like the different income streams, or like what do you recommend that their process looks like for testing out those different ones? And knowing that also, what is we have lots of quotes here during this episode, but like one of the good ones is like, you chase two rabbits, you don't catch either one, which
Right.
is definitely true. But also, from that exploration phase, it is kind of nice to test out. You have to chase 10 different rabbits to see which one you want to chase. So what's your advice in terms of people kind of discovering that for themselves?
Sure. I'm glad that you asked this, because not only do we have to pick something that lights us up, but we have to pick something that like people are asking for, right? So you need to do
Mm,
your market research. Like, you need to think about, of your following, of the audience that you have, like, what are people already looking for out there? Because you can, like, if you follow, if you chase the one rabbit that you're like, I really like doing this thing, but then you find out that like nobody's asking for that thing, you're going to have a really hard time with that income stream. So
mm,
look out there and ask, like, where is there a gap that I can fill that
mm,
matches what I like to do? So you got to find, like, what is it that people are searching for? What are they wanting to do? And that's the direction that you can go. And I think, like, one of the things that I can speak about more specifically as somebody who coaches teachers, right? Musicians who are teachers, is to think about, what do people want to learn? There's so many people out there that see all these cool performers and they're like, oh man, I wish I could sing like that, or I wish I could play like that. And I think sometimes that musician performers look at teaching as kind of like a fallback gig, but it can actually be a really lucrative profession if it's done right. So you got to look for what do people want? Meet them there. That's where you're going to find the money, and that's where you're going to find the joy.
mm. Awesome. Yeah. So yeah, it is important to kind of look at the market around, or what people are asking for, what do they actually want, and filling in the gaps, rather than just kind of going off and doing something that seems interesting, but but people aren't actually looking for. Um, I've thought about this a lot too, as it relates to like artists, and I would love to hear your perspective on this in terms of, I mean, from like a business standpoint, to me, it feels a lot more straightforward in terms of like identifying a need or an issue, and that's just sort of like that's how foundations are built, is just sort of like identifying a need, a problem,
Right.
and then offering a solution to it. But it does feel like I think it's still the same thing for artists. It's just a slightly different like framing of like, what is the problem that you're solving,
Yeah.
and getting in touch with that can help someone who is an artist who doesn't necessarily think it's not as black and white as like for business, like solving a need, but it still is like a service, and they are certainly fulfilling a need. So I'm curious what your thoughts are as it relates to like uh, what does that look like for artists who are creatives who want to make music full time, and how should they be approaching their business from that same vantage point that's going to help them actually build a sustainable business? But what is the need that you think that they're fulfilling?
Ooh, that's a really good one. Now, I think it really depends on the artist, right? Because there's so many genres out there. There's so many different types of music that are being put out into the world, and types of performances. Um, this is where you got to know your audience. So I guess like I want to kind of speak more broadly than like really niche down with a specific example. So, if you're listening to this, I want you to think about who are the people that listen to my music? Who are the people that seek out music like what we create? Right. And, what kind of a human is this person? Like, what are they doing in their daily lives? Like, what does music, why do they seek out music? Like, what is it that drives them to open whatever music platform and like search for a new artist, or what is it that drives them to follow an artist? Most often I would say that like the need that you're filling is some type of an escape, or it's some type of like a deep emotional need.
Hmm. Yeah.
But again, I think it's like, oh, it depends on what kind of a musician are you? Like what is your music bringing to the world?
Yeah. I think that's a great way to look at it. It's sort of like an emotional release. Like it's like and it depends on you as an artist, what kinds of songs you write, and probably depends on the song by song, doesn't it? Where
Probably, yeah.
you might have like a really happy song or a song about falling in love, and it's like, what need does that song fill? Well, it fills the need of someone feeling the emotion of like falling in love and wanting to
Yeah,
express that and feel that and share that with someone. Um, Probably helps too with like figuring out places where that song fits as a soundtrack for TV and film and
yeah,
other needs that it could fit. But it certainly is a need, even if we don't
yeah.
necessarily think about it that way a lot. Um, okay, so it seems like one thing that you have a lot of expertise around is different kinds of creative businesses, but in particular, like teaching as a form as one of those diverse streams of income.
Hmm.
Um, and it seems like it's a really applicable one to every artist because every artist is doing something magical with their instruments and they're making music and they have a skill that they can then pass on. How would you recommend kind of framing? There might be some artists who are listening to this right now who they don't necessarily see themselves as a teacher, and
Hmm.
they might not fully understand the opportunity. They don't want to lose their art by
Right.
by focusing on like the teaching part of it. How do you recommend that they can think about teaching, and who is it right for versus like who? Yeah, basically, who do you think is the right fit for a teaching stream of income?
Well, certainly teaching is a skill in and of itself, right? And we know that not every performer is a teacher at heart. So I guess, how do you know, like, how could teaching play a role in your income? Is to like think about like, do you want to work one-on-one with people? Like, do you enjoy being able to have those deep conversations with people and to figure out like, why do you want to play? Like, what do you want to play? Like, hey, and having those like student-led teaching situations rather than like a mentorship down. There's different types of teaching, like those two things that I just mentioned, like being a student-led kind of teacher where the student really drives what you're teaching versus like, hey, I'm going to teach you how to do XYZ riffs, or like I'm going to teach you how to do this song. So there's different types of teaching. You have to ask yourself, what kind of a teacher am I? And
Hmm.
there's different forms too. Like I mentioned one-on-one already, but for many people that's not their happy spot, and they would rather do like group sessions with people, or they would rather create a course, and provided that you have an audience that you could actually sell that course to. Like, just don't go creating courses all willy-nilly and not having an audience to sell them to. Yeah, you got to think about, what is it that my audience might be seeking out, and what is it about my playing or my singing that sets me apart. And I think that's probably where you'd want to start, and then think about what style of teaching would align with the way that I want to work, because there's so many different possibilities out there.
Hmm. Okay, got it. So teaching, yeah, it might not be for everyone,
Right.
and you'll probably know after you do it a little bit whether it's something that you resonate with, you enjoy, or not. There's also a lot of different kinds of teaching. Could be one-on-one, could be group coaching, could be uh, doing courses. Um, you mentioned one piece that is probably worth diving deeper into is having an audience, building an audience.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess that applies whether you're focused on teaching or you're focused on growing your original music or whatever. Like you need to be able to build an audience. Um, so maybe you could share from your perspective, what are the most important things that someone can do to start building that audience and nurturing it, building a real community?
So I'm sure you talk a lot about this here. I'm sure there's some fantastic advice. I think my favorite bit to say is, okay, like, great, so, grow your platforms, do the social things, like get the followers and all that jazz. But please be sure that you are also building a place that you own. Like
Mm,
you need an audience that you actually own because you don't own Instagram, you don't own YouTube, you don't like name any platform where you've got followers. You don't own those, right? If it's any kind of social media, you don't own it. So make sure that you've got some place where you've got email addresses, you can like directly contact these people and you own that list.
mm,
Because I mean, just imagine like what could happen if one day you open your phone and Instagram is gone. And that's where all of your followers were.
mm.
Not saying
That's
that's going to
so
happen anytime soon, but
yeah, I mean, at the time of recording this, like recently had sort of a scare with TikTok where like that was almost
right?
all gone. MySpace used to be a thing and it's
Oh,
not
yeah.
really anymore. Sarah, I think for everyone listening, like I didn't put Sarah up this at all, but what you just shared was like a perfect elevator pitch for our software that we built called Street Team, which is basically the way I describe it is it's like if Patreon and Discord and Facebook groups had a baby, but instead of Mark Zuckerberg owning the baby, you own your artist fan relationship. So you own the email list, the text message, but you can build a community, you can connect with your fans, and everything you just shared is like why we exist and why we built the
Yes.
platform. Um, but in terms of starting to cultivate that own list, the email list, the phone number list that you actually, even if Instagram dies, you still have that connection. How do you recommend that artists start to transform their following from different platforms into an actual email list? Like how do they grow an internal list?
Well, there's so many different ways to do it. I mean, a lot of like the standard advice out there, which works, like is offer a freebie or like give them some type of an incentive to join the list, right? And it doesn't have to be that you have to come up with this like crazy cool downloadable or anything like that. It could be as simple as, hey, like every week we send out behind the scene updates about our band. So if you want to hear like the crazy stories from being on the road, or if you want to know what we're up to behind the scenes when we're composing, that's where you want to go. Like give them some reason to join you over there. And I think that behind the scenes stuff is like one of the most attractive things to fans that you already have, because they already love what you're doing. Like they see what you're putting out on socials. They love following you, but getting that like extra glimpse of what your world is like is so attractive to people.
Mm, awesome. Yeah. So, classic advice with like freebies is always a good thing, incentives, but even things that they don't necessarily um, like have to go like crazy about, just like giving people
Yeah.
access, behind the scenes content. It's a good way to start. Okay. And how about, I feel like one pain point or something that a lot of us can relate to is content strategy and just like
Mm,
knowing how much to post, when to
yeah.
post, where to post. Do you have any recommendations for artists in terms of just creating a content calendar that doesn't feel overwhelming but does help them connect with their fans and reach new fans?
Oh boy, that's a big topic, isn't it? Like content is, I feel like you just said, like a big pain point for a lot of us because it takes a lot of time. Um, when it comes to putting together content strategies, I think zooming out is always important, and like really getting a clear idea of like what does your marketing calendar look like? Like what are you selling at different times throughout the year? Like first off, getting that laid out so that like, okay, we're focused on this tour over here, we're focused on this album release over here, and just map it out first. Figure out what are you selling and when, because oftentimes we don't think about that until like the last minute. And then, planning stuff out is way harder when we're always like scrambling day to day. So if you want to build out good content calendars, you have to think about, what does your launch cycle look like? Like what, and work it backwards. So like if like the tour starts on this date or the album launches on this date, then you need to start working your content calendar backwards to think about, okay, when do we do like the big final push for tickets? Or when do we like do the sneak, like at the very beginning, when do we do the sneak peek? Like, guess what's coming soon? Like you're going to be so excited. And so for me personally, like if I'm working through a content plan, I'm always reverse engineering. So I start with the date of the thing, like when is the event happening, and then I start going backwards, like what happens 3 days before that, what happens 2 days before that, and then just keep going backwards until you kind of build out that full content calendar. And that's going to give you an idea of what needs to happen and when. And then there's all kinds of other things you can think about, like in the types of content, but I think that the main thing is actually building a calendar first.
Cool. Good stuff. I mean, it kind of reminds me of the conversation we had earlier around goal setting and like 5-year planning, and then coming back and reverse engineering with that end in mind. So your recommendation is get clear on what are the big rocks, or what are the big events that you want to baseline your calendar around. And once you know what your big tours are or your big events or releases are, then you can kind of reverse engineer and figure out a timeline for leading up to that. How do you create breadcrumbs that kind of naturally, or how do you create those dominoes?
Yeah.
How do you create the dominoes that kind of lead up to that naturally?
Exactly. And that's a much better way to approach content than like, what do I have to post today?
Right.
Yeah. I mean, with all the way the algorithms work out there and like all the trends and stuff, I think we chase a lot of that. And that's how we come up with our content. But if we can like zoom out and, like you said, think of the big rocks and the dominoes, and then look at how the whole picture works together, then figuring out your content plan is a lot easier.
Awesome. Well, Sara, it's been a lot of fun, talking through some really like fundamental, pieces, I think, for all of us as humans and as artists, as business owners, learning how to set goals properly for a 5-year time frame, reverse engineering that, and your content calendar management, planning that. And I feel like this is a very practical conversation that hopefully people can take away and be inspired to revisit their own timelines in terms of how they're planning out their life and literally dreaming it into existence. So I really appreciate you being here today. And for anyone that is resonating with the conversation and would like to connect more with you and your materials and resources, what's the best place for them to go to dive deeper?
Sure. So you can follow me at Savvy Music Studio on pretty much any platform except for TikTok. I'm not on TikTok, sorry. But you can look for me on Instagram, Facebook, savvymusicstudio.com. We have a program. Our big program of the year starts in October, and that's our BravePants Branding and Marketing program. Where we really help people like figure out the nitty gritty from the beginning. Cause like marketing is a pain point for a lot of performers, like figuring out how to market stuff. And especially if you have like a teaching part of your career, you've got to figure out your brand before you market things. And that's what we work on from the inside out. It's really fun.
Awesome. That sounds super valuable. So like always, we'll put the links in the show notes for easy access. And Sara, thank you again for being on the podcast today.
Thanks, Michael. It was fun.